or a great learnings or inspiration that they had from their breakout sessions earlier this afternoon. I was monitoring the chat, so I know you guys were pretty active and engaged. All right, no volunteers does mean I might just call on folks. All right. Moira, thanks for sharing in the chat that you really enjoyed Dr. Joe's sessions. Did you have anything? Feel free to unmute if you wanted to share anything specific that you'd been thinking about since those sessions.
Hi, everybody. In particular, Brian's approach this afternoon in his sessions were first starting with the shifts, which gauged the focus, and the way that he started that session really helped you dive into the concepts behind assessments and building great assessments. And so it was fantastic.
Awesome. I'm glad. And good, we'll have those recorded so folks that were in other sessions will be able to still get that great information. All right. Do we have one more? Anyone else interested in sharing out a reflection from the breakout sessions?
Shelby, I can. The two sessions I watched were and participated in were both around coaching meetings. And I really appreciated that even though they were different, they were founded on some of the same important common characteristics. So I think we can all learn from each other's work, but at the same time, we all can apply our own spin to that work. And so I love the collaborative spirit where everyone's sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing as well. Good collaborative spirit. All right. Let's see here. I think we are getting pretty close to everyone joining. We've got our guest speaker ready to go. So I will actually go ahead and get us started here. I hope that you will all help me welcome our Deputy State Superintendent, Dr. John Richard. Many of you know him through his district and association leadership. We're really grateful that his leadership is back at the department with us, and we benefit from that every day. Those that know John well or have worked with him in the past know that he is dedicated, committed to putting in the hard work, doing what needs to be done. And that's that dedication that's being applied right now, helping districts and educators work through this COVID-19 pandemic, and the work that he's going to talk to us about today with the Reset, Restart Planning Guide. Just a bit of a side note, I did also just want to share that John recently won a lip sync battle that was hosted by our department leadership for ODE staff during the Public Service Employees Appreciation Week the other week. So he applies that dedication in all aspects of his leadership. We're also just very lucky to be able to book him for the meeting today. He may be considering a career in rock and roll based on the skills that we saw last week. So thank you, John, for joining us today. And I will hand it over to him so he can share more about the restart and reset work.
Thank you so much, Shelby. So with that introduction, I really thought maybe I should mute myself before I started and just see if I could like lip sync this entire presentation. That might be highly entertaining, more so than actually hearing me. And if I could pick up like a broom off the front porch, I could air guitar with the broom, since that was my prop in the lip syncing contest. But anyway, I was asked to actually, and by the way, thank you everyone for participating on in this meeting today. And I understand we have a kind of a combination of our RDLs as well as the kind of the network people in this meeting. I actually listened in for about the first hour. I heard a bit of Paulo and then most of what Heather had to say, as well as a little bit of what Ali D'Angelo was going over as well. So I know you kicked off with a really nice start this morning. So appreciate all the work everybody's doing at either the district level or kind of the RDL work that's going on out there as well. But I was asked to share kind of what things might look like moving forward. And we know this is work that's taking up a lot of time at the district and the school building level both right now. And while we are in the midst of drafting this out of our state board meeting earlier this week, our draft might have came out a bit publicly, not necessarily that we really care one way or another, other than people make a lot of assumptions when they see something. And so now we're handling quite a number of questions and comments and everything else. But we do anticipate that our kind of first document will actually be ready more officially in the next couple weeks. We're hoping either right before Memorial Day or just after that holiday. So we have somewhat of a three-prong approach to what we're calling the Reset Restart plan for education in Ohio. And so the three prongs of our Reset Restart begins with a discussion guide. And so that's just, we're going to keep it pretty simple and call it the Reset Restart Discussion Guide. It will be intended for schools and districts to pick it up and use it as a resource. And so that's really the first part of this, and I'll spend our time on that more than anything else today. But the other two prongs of our approach is going to be tools and resources that go along with that guide and that will be added actually over the next probably 6 to 8 weeks as we know more about the pandemic, as we stay obviously very well connected to the Ohio Department of Health and the governor's office in terms of direction. I'm sure we'll be updating the resources on the Reset Restart page of our website that coincide with any changes that happen or any feedback that we receive. So that's something that we, again, anticipate that becoming live on our website probably right around the same time that we put the discussion guide out to districts and schools. And then the third part of the approach, the third prong, is that of networking. And we really believe that the longer things go along through this pandemic, that more and more it's really powerful stories and it's convenings just like the one you're part of today, where people have a chance to share, where they have a chance to break out into smaller groups and really just convene with colleagues along the same ideas and interests and how to improve, that is, we're sure, every bit as powerful or more than what we're necessarily doing and saying at the department. So hopefully, as we really continue to build our work around providing resources for our schools and districts, for our educators out there, that then we also provide ways for them to convene and share what they're doing in practice that makes this all come together. And so with that, I'm going to then back up to the first prong, and that's the discussion guide. I'm deeply involved in that work from home primarily, but we are meeting virtually every day, either with an internal group or with an external group. And so first of all, let me talk just a wee bit about the process so you have an understanding if you're getting any questions. The process itself started with probably about a month ago, as we were still in quite a bit of the just response and kind of reaction mode to something that none of us had anticipated 3 months ago. We were in that mode, but we started kind of turning our attention to this isn't going to end anytime soon, and we need to start thinking about what schools will look like if there's any return to some sense of normalcy. And so our first conversations were with the Department of Health, and then we started talking to just kind of a small group of superintendents, about 10 different people who we know that's kind of the, in a sense, the gatekeeper at the district level, and any kind of view and any kind of plans will be going through superintendents. So we just started sharing some ideas. And then from there, then we've converted that into what we're calling a co-design team. And that is a team who is putting direct input into every facet of the plan that we're developing, the discussion guide or the planning guide. And so that group includes our two teachers unions in our state, OFT and OEA. It involves all of the administrative associations, the principals associations, BASA, the superintendents, OASBO, which represents school business officials. Our school boards are represented there. And then we've reached out even to students this week. We've reached out to parents via PTA, who's putting out a questionnaire. And then several of the kind of related associations like the Career Techs, our charters or community schools, our non-public schools. So we're really being very inclusive just to make sure that any kind of voice that's out there in terms of what reset restart should look like will have some level of input into what we're putting together in the planning guide. And so we see it as somewhat of a fluid document, because even as we put the document out here in the next couple weeks, as we receive further information, we see this as something that's more of a living document that will be updated again as we learn more about any recommendations coming from the health department, but also as we see what other people are doing through the networking. If we have good resources that come our way, then we would anticipate adding to our resources also. And so what the discussion guide looks like, if you haven't seen it on a local newscast or something in the past 2 days, it begins with an introductory section that has 4 kind of parts in that section. First of all, we lay out the purpose pretty clearly, and it just says essentially that this is designed as a kind of an instrument or a tool for districts and for principals or teachers to pick up and say, here's what we need to be considering. It then goes into some underlying assumptions, the major assumptions being that, COVID-19 is going to remain with us for some time. And as a result, schools will look different. I think we're pretty upfront about the fact that, again, unless the health guidelines change, that we know we can't do school in the same manner in which was happening prior to March of 2020. We then lay out some principles with the plan itself, and what we kind of are letting guide our work. And those include things just like collaboration. They include, probably the first and foremost is the health and safety of students, of employees, and of Ohio citizens because of the risk of spread even from students. And then another key principle in this, and one that you should hear kind of loud and clear, is that with the state guidelines, and most of the prescriptive ones will come from the Department of Health, that the majority of decision making beyond that will be left to the locals. And so that's really key. We've tried to take that approach through our kind of reaction mode over the past couple of months. But moving forward, as much as we can, we're going to allow for flexibility at the local level as well. So just so you know a little bit about the process, and then also what's kind of underlying that first introduction section. The last thing in that section is we also lay out how important it is to develop partnerships. And we call out kind of the ESCs in that section, but other partnerships, again, such as the one you're involved in today, are really key as we move forward. And so we want to make sure that we send that message loud and clear. We then get into probably the meat of this document, and that is what I think schools and districts will be looking for. And that is, where are all the decision points? And so the first section, which is the most prescriptive, are the health guidelines. And most of these come pretty directly from the Ohio Department of Health. And it's nothing that we haven't heard in all of the other kind of reopenings of our economy. Those are going to include the importance of sanitizing everything from getting on the bus to any kind of transitions at the school. But then from a more personal standpoint, what's expected of students and staff. And those, again, are nothing we're not hearing in other facets of our culture right now. And that it comes down to personal hygiene with the hand washing. It comes down to maintaining kind of that physical distance and trying to reduce as many direct interactions and contact as possible throughout the day. And it also includes the idea of masks. And so we're in all of that conversation currently with the Department of Health, because we know in education, this is going to really be a challenge. What we're doing is trying to lay out so everybody starts with the idea of let's just walk through a student's typical day. And so that means from the time a young, person wakes up in the morning, what's their mode of transportation to school? What does it look like when they're entering the building? Because we know what kind of a mass gathering that is at the beginning of every day. Where are they going as soon as they report to school? What do transitions look like between classes? So we know we are going to really have to think differently in terms of our use of time, our use of physical space, and even probably our use of employees and our use of staff. When you think about the four basic components of keeping people safe, with personal hygiene, again, distancing, masks, and then sanitizing. And so that's going to be really, really key, I think, is for districts and schools to consider, knowing that we've got this health guidance on one side, then how do we use our time? How do we use our physical space? And how do we use our staff in making sure that all of those things are upheld? And so there's also really key importance placed on professional development for staff, so they clearly know the expectations. But then there also is going to have to be quite a bit of training for students, because this is going to be new learned behavior as we enter into whatever a return to school ultimately looks like. And so we're going to be asking a lot of both staff and students in learning these kind of new typical protocols and procedures. So that's probably as I said, the most prescriptive part of it is coming from our partnership with the Department of Health. And I think once those questions are answered and how we go about doing that, then the other three sections are maybe not easy, but they're probably easier than figuring out that first section. And then the other three sections are education. And I think probably education, the key question is going to be, what does the delivery of instruction look like? Is it going to be, everybody returning? Is it going to be a percentage of students returning? Are we going to make use of online learning, blended learning, all of those things that we've been, attempting outside of a physical return? I think that's what we add into the mix now is, if we do have a physical return to the building, how many students, what does it look like, all of those types of issues. So that's, again, probably the first decision point after figuring out how we can maintain the health guidelines. And so that's a real key in that section. We highlight the needy students, our students with disabilities, those with health concerns to begin with. Those types of issues are brought up in that education section as well. From there, then the third section in all of these considerations for districts and schools to make is in the area of social emotional health. Again, given where we're at, we believe that that's really going to be a critical component of any return to school. It even as a component now as we're in a remote mode, but returning to school, we know that will bring with it a different set of fears and possibilities that we need to be very on top of. So we have an entire section on social emotional health. And then finally, our fourth section in the considerations for schools and districts is around the idea of all of the operations that go on. And so there, again, we kind of call out transportation. We go into what would be expected with food service and cafeteria, what our maintenance and custodial staff will need to consider, all of those types of issues in that particular section. So that's a really quick run through, but it gives you an idea of the type of thinking that's gone into this. Again, we've been extremely grateful for all the partners who've weighed in and helped us really populate these different sections. We're getting close to a final draft. But we obviously want to make sure that we have that we're totally aligned with both the Department of Health and the governor's office, as well as several others. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because it's really, I think it's a key piece of this, is we know that much of what the planning entails will also be directly somewhat affected by local collective bargaining agreements, as well as then there'll probably be a lot of requirements for MOUs, for memorandums of understanding, to take place with employee organizations. And I really want to say that we've had great cooperation. We've actually sat with those who are typically at the bargaining table, and I think everybody's trying to approach this in a very cooperative manner. So that's also been really helpful, and I just felt like that was important for all of you to know that that's occurring in a really nice collaborative way also. So many of the tools and resources as we move along in this space will certainly have relevance for this particular group. We know, for example, we are developing a kind of a student readiness instrument that we can take many of our test questions, release test questions, and put them right into the hand of educators, of teachers, and of course there'll be data that comes along with that we can be very helpful with. So kind of the gap analysis tools I'm sure you've heard about, in particular in math and in ELA, as well as a focus on literature. Those will be resources as well. And then the diagnostic like test items that I've already mentioned. So we hope that RDLs will be playing a key role in supporting districts and supporting schools as we effectively use the tools that will continue to be developed and shared via the web page that I mentioned earlier. So I know a lot of you have already been working in your different organizations and with districts on these efforts. So hopefully, kind of a standardized approach to an extent with a lot of district flexibility. Hopefully that will help you in your various roles as well. And again, I want to focus on that third prong of networking. The RDL network will really be important as we move forward, so we can emphasize that third prong as well. So I know I covered a lot. I feel like I did quite a bit of talking in a really fairly compacted amount of time, but I want to keep you on schedule. So at this point, I want to say thank you for meeting virtually. Sometimes meeting virtually really kind of drains you more than it does in person. Thank you for presenting to each other and taking a day to kind of dive into everything that's happening and what it means to be a data lead or to work with data for your district or as an RDL. So with that, I think I'll turn it back to Shelby, And she's the great hostess. Since she gave me such a nice introduction, I'll turn it back to our hostess extraordinaire to do any Q&A that we might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John, for sharing. I think, the emphasis that we've put on partnerships in the strategic plan, it makes me really proud to be part of the department and see how we're really walking the walk there with this really important work as we all adapt and move forward and do that really collaboratively. And the value that this network has to that work is really crucial and exciting that we have had the network already existed, so we didn't have to pull them together. So now we can just use the expertise that's already here. While we've got John, if there's any questions for him on these issues or about his lip syncing, which I knew was going to come up. That's going to have to be about him if he wants to share that. But any questions about the reset restart work, and then we can dig into general Q&A about any of the topics we've covered today, SLDS, or any info from your breakout sessions as well.
So Shelby, I do see one question there about if there's anything about student teachers or ed prep. And that's actually a good question. While it's not necessarily called out, because there's a section that says it probably best practice is not to have visitors in the schools. That would not include like a teacher prep program or student teachers. They would be considered staff. And so they would be treated as any other employees in that type of plan. And we're actually considering clarifying that type of an approach. So I'm not sure if that's where the question was coming from. But to that extent, they would be treated like any other employee in the district. And no, I'm not going to lip sync today. I do see that. And I think that's the extent of the questions I see right now.
I've got one more here for you, John. I'm just thinking through if the Reset Restart group will be making any recommendations about the future of state testing and how that will play into testing moving forward.
I don't believe so. While there's a lot of conversation around that, it's really not the purpose of this group. This group is really looking at just kind of what does it mean to come back to schools physically and how can we look at it? We're going to be looking for different models, which the resources should go into that more in depth as we move along, and certainly the networking. What we'd really like to get is different people's approaches to how they're going to make this work, and that will be more that role. But testing per se will be conversations that are more outside of this focus.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for joining us. Have a good weekend. You've earned it.
And same to you and everybody else on this in this meeting.
Yeah, and I think there's one more question which
there, Shelby.
I think, yeah, John, just if it's focused solely on coming back 100% in person.
It is not. I think we're pretty clear that we're saying a return to school is going to look different, and it's probably going to be mixed methods. We are going to probably, what I didn't say is we're going to have to be extremely flexible and agile and nimble in a return, meaning that it's not going to be a one size fits all. While maybe somewhere in Northwest Ohio, we can keep the health guidelines and there's like a very, very low number of cases, the local health departments will say, it's probably safe to return here, where maybe somewhere else in a suburb or a high density population, that may not be where the local health department feels comfortable, as well as it's just may not be able to keep the distancing and so forth. So that might be a percentage of students. So the flexibility and agility are going to be important. The other thing I didn't mention just because of time is that, we anticipate there'll probably be flare-ups either locally or hopefully not statewide, but as that occurs locally, a school or a district might have to return to a total remote type of mode momentarily, or for 2 weeks period. So we're going to have to be really thinking along those lines and be able to move quickly based on whatever our health situation is.
Thanks, John. That's a really good point to highlight as well. All right, I think we can shift to some general Q&A, which I will a little bit leave here as just a wild, wild west. Feel free to unmute or use the chat box if you had any specific questions that we weren't able to get to in other sessions. And while folks think through that, how they'd like to ask their questions or participate, I would like to borrow from Christy's wonderful facilitation earlier in the day and just ask that everyone share a few reflection words in the chat box that really describe your experience today, or share out, what you're excited to dig into, how some of what you've learned or shared today is going to apply moving forward. Would just love to hear. All right. I'm very excited to see that the first word shared was that the sessions today were relevant. That's very good. Thank you. All right, getting some good sharing. Good, people excited to get the item analysis. All right. Oh, I'm super glad also to see here we've got folks interested in joining committees. So those committees are going to grow stronger and stronger, which is really great. All right. Well, I think I will let this chat go for a little bit longer. If folks want to share, if questions do pop up, we will jump in and try to answer. I have a couple of reminders, but first, just thank you all again for just really spending the whole day with us. The participation engagement all day has been strong. I have been just completely re-energized by the learning and sharing the conversations and engagement today. So this has been really wonderful. I have a couple of reminders. So we will share out links to all of the recordings as well as all of the materials. So you'll get those pieces of information for sessions that you weren't able to attend, as well as the ones you did, in case you'd like to share them with a colleague or review them again to take your learning and move that forward. We will also be sharing out an evaluation of the day to help us see what next steps we need to take, how we can improve moving forward as well. That evaluation, just a quick 10-question survey, so you know we all love data, that should be in your inbox on Monday. Let's see, links and recordings, we already talked about that. Your continuing education certificates are going to be emailed out by Jackie Seward. So thank you, Jackie, so much for doing that. Give her some time to get those emailed out to everyone, and then feel free to reach out to us if you haven't seen that in the next couple of weeks. And I think if we don't have any questions, I'm doing a quick scroll through the chat to see. I will actually hand it over to Chris Woolard to officially close us out for the day and kick off our weekend.
Great. Well, thanks for the honor. Shelby told me to keep it short, like 30 seconds for some closing remarks. So it's been a full day, and I hope that the logistics worked out for everybody. I think this has been incredibly smooth. I know it's a long time to sort of be online throughout the day, but so many thanks to our organizers, our facilitators, our presenters. I hope that you all found this a valuable use of the time. At the department and myself personally, I think that this is such important work that you do, and that's only magnified by this current crisis. And I think some of the conversations we've had today about kind of rethinking what assessment means and what kind of assessment data is going to be valuable, as well as questions around attendance and engagement. And so typical attendance data is not necessarily going to be what we need next year, but sort of understanding who's engaged and who's not engaged are so important. And this group is so well positioned to help schools address those issues. So keep fighting the good fight. We've got lots of great opportunities, including the work that's coming out of the SLDS federal grant, as well as some of the proving ground stuff. And on behalf of the department, thank you. Thanks for what you do. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you all in person sometime soon. Thank you.
I have one more thing. I just want to give a huge shout out to Shelby, who totally pulled this all together in extraordinary circumstances and made it happen. And she engaged her entire team, and it's been spectacular. So thank you to Shelby. Bye, everyone.
My Teams is finally giving up and like crashing as we speak. So it's been a wonderful day. It lasted so long. Have a great weekend.
Yes, enjoy your nice long weekend, everyone. Take care.
I like can't press any buttons on it anymore. It's just frozen.
Thank goodness it's Friday.
Oh my goodness.
It knows, man. It knows. Great job, everyone. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Shelby. Thank you, accountability team.
Yes, thank you, Will and Brittany and the whole team if you're still on here. So
yes,
great.
thank you so much. It was an incredible day.
It went really, really well. I mean, the sessions I were in were flawless. I don't know how all the breakouts went, but I didn't see any technical problems.
Yeah, there's